753-8080. 954-753-8080.
Now you can get 740 WSBR Money Talk Radio with no static at all. Now on FM's 103.9 and 96.9. Money Talk Radio, WSBR.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Seibel. I'm excited to announce my new show called Ask Robert, which will be on Fridays from 3 to 4 p.m. I'm an attorney and public speaker. I began my career in Wall Street and formed my own law firm over 30 years ago in New York and Florida. I've specialized in tax planning for celebrities and high-income individuals, as well as representing corporate and international business transactions. I am currently associated with a global commercial real estate and business financial company. On my show, we'll be covering stock market wrap-up for the week, as well as mortgage financing, investing, real estate, insurance law, and other general subjects of interest to you with my very fascinating guests. I also plan to have a special Ladies' Day 1 week a month to cover issues of greater interest to women, such as divorce, social, and financial matters, with very special female guests. Now, let's on with the show. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my show, Ask Robert, the Women's Prophet. This show is basically dedicated to helping out the needs of women, both and financially and legally, all kinds of questions that they may have and interests that they are concerned about. My principal devotion is to women. I find that in our society, women don't get enough information, and in fact, as I've analyzed the news, there's all kinds of men on television, MSNBC, CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business. They're men talking to men. And then we've got women speaking to women. And you've got Oprah, you've got Sally Jesse in the past, you've got Ellen DeGeneres, Wendy Williams, the show The Talk, The View, Susie Orman. Again, these are all women speaking to women on women's issues. Now, you have a couple of men speaking to women. You have Dr. Oz speaking to women about health issues, and you have Dr. Phil speaking to women about relationship issues. However, there doesn't seem to be anyone speaking to women about a man speaking to women about financial and legal issues. And so I've decided to have this show, and that will be my focus principally. I do intend to speak periodically about the market, the economy, taxations, insurance, all kinds of issues, which will also affect men. But principally, I am focused upon problems and issues affecting women. Now, I want to emphasize that later in the show, in the half hour, you'll be able to call in at 888-721-0074. It's the number at the bottom of the screen. You'll also be able to see me now on Facebook, live streaming. I go out on my Facebook page, which is Ask Robert Radio. You can tune into that right now on Facebook and see me live on Facebook. You may also get me on YouTube. You can find me on YouTube initially now. If you go to the YouTube page and type in AMP2 TV, Ask Robert, you'll find me on YouTube. There will be eventually, very shortly, a direct link to me on YouTube. And so you'll be able to find me. And of course, on YouTube, you can get me live, or you can get me today, tomorrow, next week, next month, and see my shows. And of course, I also go out on podcasts and Periscope. Eventually, we hope to go into other cities. Right now, on AM, you can reach me on 740 AM and 96.9 or 103.9 FM. The station, I'm told, AM goes from approximately Orlando down to North Miami, and the FM station goes from Palm Beach County down to Miami-Dade County. So it's quite an extensive reach. Now, the subject of my first half hour today is going to be domestic abuse. We've all been reading about the Me Too movement, about how men have been using and abusing women for decades, and particularly men in power and how atrocious their behavior has been, and how finally they're being caught up with. People like Harvey Weinstein, other famous actors, senators, Charlie Rose, Kevin Spacey, just to name a few, have been exposed. Bill Cosby's trial just ended with a verdict of guilty against Bill Cosby this very week. And it's frankly about time. It's about time that these men were exposed for the types of people that they are, people that are abusing and using women for their own purposes. It's terrible, and hopefully it will stop in the years to come. Women deserve to be treated fairly and openly and evenly and lawfully. Now, the Me Too movement also deals with the rights of women to appeal their situations, rights of women to go to court, to expose, to bring legal actions against men. What about rights of women who have husbands that are abusing them? All right, and there have been countless cases every single day, and I'm sure there are tens of thousands of cases, if not hundreds of thousands of cases of women being abused every day and every week in this country. It's a sad but very true phenomenon. There are women that are battered wives all over the country that put up with it because they have nowhere to go. They have no alternative. Their husband is providing for them. They have a family with children. They're afraid to do anything, so they continue to allow their husbands to emotionally, mentally, and sometimes tragically, physically. We know what happened in the O.J. Simpson case 20 years ago. We know the results of that case. Sadly, those kind of cases happen probably every week. As a lawyer, I've come into contact with other cases which have sometimes been as outrageous as the O.J. case, and unfortunately, sometimes where the individual the individual victim never is able to go after the perpetrator because they sometimes get away with their crime. I'm going to discuss one situation which affected me personally in a moment. Now, before we get into that, I just want to go over briefly with you, women particularly, what are some of the signs to look for about a husband or a boyfriend or lover that may be pointing towards domestic abuse down the line or even currently. The first sign that you might want to look for is humiliation. Is this person humiliating you in public? Is he making fun of you? Is he treating you in a way that embarrasses you in front of others, in front of your friends, in front of your relatives, in front of your children? This is certainly a sign that he's not respecting you. Does he insult you verbally when you're in public or even in private? Does he say things to you that, in fact, are much more than, shall I say, a comment or an objection, but rather a very strong verbal insult? Does he use abusive language to you? Does he, say things to you which are calculated to hurt your feelings? Does he say things about your family, about your parents, about your children? Does he say anything that in any way makes you feel less than the person that you are? This is insulting and should not be stand for. Now, what about physical violence? Does he actually go from implying that he's going to do something to you to actually striking you in any way? Maybe he touches you. Maybe he first grabs you by the arm, by the hand, by the shoulder. Maybe he touches you in a way that provokes you. And that can then, in turn, lead to something that might be more aggressive. Perhaps ultimately he feels that he's got a license to touch you at any time. You're his wife, you're his girlfriend, he believes that you're his property, and therefore he's going to treat you any way he likes. This happens to countless women, and this is a very, very, very serious sign that there could be extremely serious consequences ahead. And of course, this happened, as we all know, in the O.J. Simpson case. Denise Brown had serious physical abuse that she incurred for years. She had black eyes, she had bruises all over her body, and yet she continued to be a battered wife and continued to not press charges against O.J., ultimately, we know what happened, led to her death. Okay, now another sign, does your loved one perform any controlling behavior against you? Does he try to control you when you're in a public setting? Does he try to restrict what you say, what you do, where you go? Does he tell you can't go shopping, or you can't go play tennis with your friends, or you can't have a social gathering with your lady friends? Does he try to limit you in any way? Or does he limit you when you're with your children? And in essence, is he doing anything to restrict you from being the full person that you are and allow you to enjoy a free and fair life? Is he literally structuring your whole life? This is, again, totally unnecessary, and it's a sign that there could be trouble ahead. Now, there's another very telling sign, and that's unpredictable mood swings. Okay, often you can be with your husband, your lover, your boyfriend, and suddenly he goes from being friendly, in a good mood, and suddenly you say something and he snaps. And before you know it, you're in a major argument. He's yelling and screaming at you. Maybe he breaks something. He throws a plate against the wall, or he throws something at you, or he strikes you, or he strikes one of your children. Whatever it is, he suddenly goes from being, Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. He literally changes his personality in a moment. Unpredictable mood swings are often, again, predictors of unpredictable behavior in the future and should be watched very carefully. Another interesting observation that you have to be on your guard for is picking at faults. Okay, I should say provoking at faults. In other words, he constantly is nitpicking. He looks at you. He doesn't like the way you're dressed. He doesn't like the way you look. He doesn't like the way you've done your hair, the way you've done your makeup, the way you're treating the children, the way you're dressing the children. Anything and everything he seems to be finding fault. Whereas before, he thinks you are beautiful, and he loved you, and he hugged you. All of a sudden now, everything that you're doing, he seems to be finding fault with. This, again, can be telltale of trouble ahead. And again, must be watched by you, because, quite frankly, if this is a sign, down the road, it can get a lot worse. Now, another problem that often occurs is when your loved one starts to alienate your family or your friends. He starts pushing away your friends, maybe your closest girlfriend, your other girlfriends. Suddenly he tells you you can't see them, or he limits when you can see them, or you can only see them for an hour or two. He doesn't allow you to go out for an evening out with the girls, which so many women enjoy, or he restricts your movements. Maybe he takes your car away, or he complains that you're driving too much, or he complains that you're coming home too late, or he complains that you're not treating the children correctly. Or maybe he's alienating your family, your parents. Maybe he doesn't allow your parents to any longer come over to your house. Maybe he doesn't want to invite them for a family dinner. Maybe he doesn't allow you to go out with your family for dinner, or your other relatives. These are, again, all signs of him trying to restrict your actions, alienate the people that love you and are around you, and push you away from the people that most want to support you and take care of you. Again, a very dangerous sign. Now, another very troublesome sign is placement of blame. If suddenly your husband starts blaming you for everything that goes wrong in the household, the bills are too much, it's all your fault, you spend too much money, you're spending too much money on groceries, his dinner wasn't cooked right, you cooked it, you're to blame, or the children aren't doing well in school, it's your fault, or he got in trouble in his job, it was because you created friction at home, you're creating stress, and you're making him not concentrate on his work as well. You're the one who's causing stress in his life. You're the one who's causing him to fail. It's very, very easy for the other party to blame the sibling, the mate, to say, you're the cause of my faults. You're the cause of my problems. You're the cause of me not making as much money. You're the one who says we must live here in this city rather than that city. I wanted to move to this city, but you prevented it, or your family prevented us from moving, or the children prevented us from moving. You didn't want to understand my problems. And again, shifting the blame to the other spouse, again, is extremely, extremely troubling. Now, another sign, manipulation. Does he try to manipulate what you're doing? Does he try to, again, control exactly your activities? Does he try to structure your day? Does he try to, in essence, tell you what to do, where to go, how to do it, what to say, and who to say it to? This, again, can be very annoying and stressful, and, of course, in the end, can produce very bad results. And finally, and again, one of the most dangerous signs are calculated outbursts. Does he suddenly, out of nowhere, we talk about mood swings before, but now we're talking about something much more serious. Does he suddenly, out of nowhere, have an outburst where he literally goes berserk, where he starts yelling and screaming at you? Does he start breaking things? Does he hit your children? Does he slap your son or your daughter? Does he hit the dog? Does he do something that becomes so outrageous that it really gets you scared, and you want to hide, or maybe you want to leave the house and jump in the car with your kids and drive away? These are very, very, very frightening type of episodes, and ones that really ultimately, sadly, can lead to tragedy. Now, I want you to remember all of the things I've said to you today, and remember basically one by one the things you've got to look for. And let's review them again one more time, and I'll go down the list. Okay, again, first, there's the humiliation. Number 2, verbal insults. Number 3, physical violence. Okay, number 4, controlling behavior. Number 5, unpredictable mood swings. Number 6, picking at faults, provoking faults. Okay, number 7, does he alienate your family and friends? Does he place blame on you for things? Does he try to manipulate you? And finally, does he have calculated outbursts, okay, which are totally unpredictable? These are all very, very telling signs of trouble on the horizon. And you must be aware of these. Otherwise, you may suffer tragic consequences. And with that said, now, I want to move to something that affected me personally in my life. May 2nd, this week, tragically, was the anniversary of my beloved sister's death. My sister, very tragically, was murdered by her husband, okay? She was the victim of a battering husband. She suffered emotional and verbal abuse for several years. We didn't know about it. My sister was a wonderful, wonderful person. She was 28 when she died. She worked as my receptionist in my law offices. My father had his insurance offices in the adjoining offices on the same floor as I did. My sister, Barbara was her name, was our common receptionist. She worked for us for a period of time. She was a lovely, lovely person, very delicate. If she liked you and you hurt yourself, she would cry. She was that sensitive. She wasn't an aggressive person. She wasn't a bad person. She was a beautiful person, like a flower. She loved everybody. Unfortunately, she was engaged when she was 21 to a young man who was slated to be a professional, and 3 to 4 weeks before they were slated to be married, he broke off their engagement. Well, she was shattered. She was totally shattered. She was 21, and she felt that her life was over, and she actually tried to commit suicide. Okay, she slashed her wrists. She went into a mental hospital. She was treated, and it took many, many months to get her to build up her well-being and her sense of well-being to the point where she could feel normal again. Eventually, she did regain a composure, and she took a job. And then eventually she met would soon be her husband. This man was not a professional. He drove a taxi cab for a living, all right? He, in fact, didn't really have much to go on in life. He made a very, very modest living. we tried, my dad and I tried to employ him in my dad's insurance offices. He ended up costing my father tens of thousands of dollars in lost business because, in fact, he had no knowledge, experience, or education. All he knew how to do was drive a cab. And so eventually we had to let him go. We ended up subsidizing their marriage. They got married when my sister was 24 years old, and they were living together. We bought them an apartment in Staten Island, a condominium, and we, in essence, subsidizes their standard of living. We gave them money each week, and at least they lived. They bought a large dog, and they continued living in Staten Island. My sister eventually took a job working for my dad and myself as a receptionist in our office. Her husband, he would drive her into the city, into Manhattan every day, drop her off at the building in Midtown. She'd come upstairs, work the day, and at the end of the day, he would pick her up in his cab and take her home. Now, this went on for several years. All during this time, we had no idea that, in fact, there was any abuse going on, mentally or emotionally. There were no bruises to see. There were times when I'd come in and see my sister laying down on the table on her desk, and I'd say, "Come on in, sweetheart, what's the matter?" And immediately she'd start crying, and I knew something was wrong. Anyway, eventually, my parents were so nervous, and by the way, I should add that in addition to my dad coming in the office, once or twice a week, my mother would come into the office as my dad's bookkeeper. So the entire family was in the office each week. We had no other siblings. And so we all were together. We had a wonderful family. We all loved each other. We all supported each other. But my sister was married to this guy. But for better or worse, it was still her husband. So she supported him. And she was caught really between a rock and a hard place. She loved her family, but she also loved her husband. Even though he was abusing her, she was a typical battered wife. So she continued with this pattern of abuse, and she put up with it, as millions of women would do. Now, what happened eventually was that my dad, whose insurance company had a convention in Puerto Rico, invited me to be a speaker at that convention. I often gave speeches on matters of taxes and insurance and legal matters. And so I went down to Puerto Rico with my mother and my father. We left on a Friday, and on a Monday morning, several days later, my dad and I were swimming in the ocean on the beach. My mother was sitting there on the beach watching us, and as we got out of the water, my mother had disappeared from the beach. We couldn't understand why. Suddenly, a representative from the company came over to my dad and said that the president of the company wanted to see my dad up at his suite. So we went upstairs. We couldn't imagine what it could be. We just had no idea. Maybe it was an agent that turned sick. We had no idea. Well, we got up to the president's suite. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and he had a drink in his hand. And he was walking back and forth. And, in fact, my father said to him, "What is it? What is it, Lenny? Tell me, what's the story?" My father's name was Charles. He said, "Charlie, I don't know how to tell you this, but we just got news from New York that your daughter is dead." Well, it was like, at that very moment, you took a knife and you stabbed it into my father's heart. Okay? My mother was already taken up to that room by another representative of the company. She was led into the living room, and thank God, I was with her and with them at the time this news broke, because my mother was immediately hysterical, and she wanted to kill herself. And it's hard for me to tell this story, but I want you to hear, because this is domestic abuse that I experienced big time in my life. And it was one of the turning points of my life. So with that, we flew back to New York. I was responsible. My sister, in fact, was taken that morning, that day that she died, to the office by her husband. Now, I confronted him at the funeral, and I said to him, "Alan, what happened? I want you to tell me everything that happened from the day we left to the day, Monday, 3 days later, when my sister died." And he said, "Well, we had an argument on the way into the office, and I decided to go up to the office with her that morning. And we did have an argument which continued about 8:30 in the morning. There was nobody in the office yet. And, in fact, I had a little terrace and to my office, a window and a terrace. And he said, well, we had an argument, and I grabbed her, and I sort of shook her a little bit, and then he said she fell. Now, the indication or the implication was that she, in effect, voluntarily climbed out and, literally went out the window over the terrace and killed herself. This was highly, highly suspicious by me. And when I pushed him further, he did at least admit that, he pushed her. And again, she may have fallen, but anything that may have happened was purely accidental. Well, nevertheless, he still implied that she basically fell on her own volition. I never was satisfied with that. About several weeks later, I continued to make inquiries. The bottom line is that I believe to this day, I know, in fact, we tried to attempt to prosecute him. I don't really want to go into the details of that, but the fact is that he got away basically with murdering my sister. And to this day, my parents are now gone. My mother passed away 9 years ago. She never, ever got over this. In fact, I would go to their home in New Jersey, and I'd see my dad in the living room with a towel over his face, and he'd be sobbing and thinking about my sister. And in fact, if he cried out loud, my mother would get hysterical, totally hysterical. So this went on for years and years and years. And I'm telling you this story in memorial to my sister who passed away. This is the anniversary of her death this week, May 2nd. I'll never, ever forget her. I swore when my sister passed away on her funeral that for the rest of my life, I would do anything in my power to take care of women in trouble. If I met a woman who needed a lawyer, she needed advice, she needed some money, she needed an apartment, she needed free legal recommendations, she needed anything, I was going to be the good guy to help her. Because if I had been around, this tragedy may never have happened. Unfortunately, in life, 90% of men are takers. They're not givers. Women tend to get goofed over all the time. Women are abused all of the time in our society. Well, I'm trying to be one of the good guys, and that's why I started this radio show. I'm out here to give advice to women. I'm out here to help women. I'm out here to give help to women, their financial needs and their legal needs. If a man is abusing you, I'm going to give you the information that you're going to need to get an order of protection against him, get him out of the house, bring a legal action. If he's not supporting you and your children, I'm going to help you to get child support. If you have something else that's causing you a problem from your loved one, I'm going to give you advice, and it doesn't have to be while we're on the air. You can reach me either on the with the show station, 888-721-0074. Leave a message, or you can call me on my personal cell number, and I'm going to give it to you now, 917-885-2610. 917-885-2610. If you're a woman that's being abused by a loved one, a husband, a boyfriend, I want you to call me. I want you to call me, tell me, Robert, I've got a problem, and I'm going to try to help you. I mean this sincerely. This is what I've dedicated my law practice to, along with my business. This is what I do. And every time I help a lady, I honor my sister's memory. And with that, I want to move on with the show. I hope that you'll remember everything I've said to you today. Now, let's go on. I want to just mention a couple of my sponsors now. One of them is Froelich Financial. Froelich Financial, Mark Froelich, is an estate planner, consummate life insurance and estate planning man. He lives here in Boca. His offices are on Camino Real. Mark handles gigantic clients and small clients the same. He's thoroughly professional. He comes up with brilliant ideas. He's very fair. He's not like a consummate salesman where all they want to do is sell you a policy. He wants to sit down with you and really solve your estate planning needs. I recommend his services highly. He's worked with some of the wealthiest individuals in all of Boca and Miami, as well as ordinary people as well. And I know him for a long time. I can't speak more highly about Mark Froelich. He can be reached at 561-807-8255. 807-8707. Again, 807-8707. Now, the next company that I want to mention is Global Loan. Global Loan are international commercial loan brokers. They broker commercial, real estate, and business transactions anywhere from $500,000 to $500 million. They do business all over the world. They have capabilities that are far exceeding a lot of banks that you might go to. So if you have a need for a commercial loan of any size, they can help you. Their terms and conditions are extremely competitive in many instances, but they help people particularly who can't get loans other places. These are people that literally are turned down by their regular banks and must pursue other channels. Global Loan is there to help you. They can be reached at 800-878-FUND. Again, 800-878-FUND. Okay, that's 800-878-3863 for your commercial, real estate, and business transaction financing needs. They're there to help you today, any day. You can call them 7 days a week. Now, finally, I'm a big believer in grooming of men. I like neatness. I like to dress well. I like to take care of myself. I like to look well. I'm a single guy now. I'm divorced. And I like to make a nice appearance. I go in for manicures. I even have pedicures from time to time. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I like to dress well. And, in fact, I don't believe enough men are really into good grooming. I go for my good grooming here in Boca to a place called Salon Oasis. They're on Glades Road, corner of Andrews, and they are truly the outstanding salon in all of Boca Raton, and probably one of the finest salons I've ever been to. And I've been to salons in New York City, in Los Angeles, and internationally, in London and other cities. Salon Oasis is unbelievable. They're huge. They must have 40 chairs. They are busy, frankly, all the time, but they always have room for other people. They have colorists there that are magnificent, hair cutters. They have people doing manicures, pedicures. They have people, estheticians. Every service that a woman or even a man could ask for, they can provide in a friendly, beautiful atmosphere. They serve food to people, coffee, refreshments. It's a delightful place to be. And I see women that can spend hours and hours there going from one procedure to the next. I recommend their services highly. They're at 6100 Glades Road, as I say, corner of Andrews. Their phone number is 561-482-9610. Again, 561-482-9610. I would urge you to give them a call. They're not the typical nail salon where you go to and where you just have your nails done, ladies. They are a full-service salon, and they are incredible. And the women and men that are working there are friendly, thoroughly professional. Michael, who is the principal owner with his partner, is a total gentleman. He's a delight to talk to. He specializes himself in colorizing, as I believe, and his staff are really the most professional people I've come across. I was just there this morning, and they are just wonderful people to deal with. So, again, I recommend their services highly. Okay, with that said, before we get into some couple of questions, I want to talk just ever so slightly about the market. From what I understand a little earlier today, the market was up about an hour ago. The Dow was up about 280. As you probably know, yesterday, the market was down as much as 400 points, but it rallied later in the day. The 200-day moving average started to come back, and that gave the bulls some cause of encouragement. So they ended up bringing the market back so that by the time the market closed, it closed near even. Now, this was a good sign. It showed some strength in the market. Apparently, there's not as much concern about major trade action with China. There's a strong belief that Trump will make some moves that will be not so threatening with China, again, because it's a midterm election year, and he's making moves. You've heard things even today where he's talking about talks between North Korea and South Korea. These are all very encouraging signs, positive signs to people in the market, and certainly, I guess it's a reason why the market is showing a bit of a rebound. I'm not going to get into recommending particular stocks today with you, as we can cover that in another show. I will, however, discuss very shortly. Do we have any callers yet, Joe?
We have Christina on the line for you.
I'm sorry, who do we have?
Christina.
Christina, put her on, please. Hello, Christina, are you there?
Yeah.
How are
Yes.
you?
Hi, Robert. How are you
Okay,
today?
I want to welcome Christina Lynn onto my show. I must tell you all that Christina is the individual who found me. I was giving a speech about a month and a half ago here in Boca, and she came up to me afterwards and she said, "Have you ever done radio before?" And I said, "No, well, I've done a television, but I've never done radio." She said, "Well, you have a very nice voice. You seem to be articulate. You're a lawyer. You're a nice-looking fellow, and I think, you'd be good on radio." So here I am. I went to the station manager, and he spoke to me, and he says, you're hired. So here I am. So, Christina, what's on your mind today?
Right. Well, I just want to say
By the way,
I really love your show.
I'm
a big fan.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Christina.
Oh, well, I just want to say I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm glad I got it right because you are helping so many people. You just have so much great advice in so many different areas. Not just the markets, but for men and women and relationships and all kinds of great things.
Christina, when is your show on, by the way? You have your own show.
Yes, I do, and I'm on Monday nights at 7:30, and that's called Wake Up America with Christina Lynn. So would like to encourage all your audience to listen to me on Monday night, and I'm on WNN Radio in Boca.
Right, that's a sister
WNN
station.
7:30.
Right, okay. And what is your show about, Christina?
Well, Wake Up America is a show, I based it on having been an investigative journalist in Washington, D.C., and in many different capacities.
Right.
I used to do a show on American Radio Network.
Right.
And so we cover a lot of cutting-edge topics. We look at what's new in holistic medicine. We look at what's really going on in the world. We really try to delve into real news and, look at real news as opposed to some of the things out there that they call fake news,
Yes.
And to see behind the headlines. I've had some people from Ancient Aliens that are going to be coming up soon, and they're going to be talking about UFOs and, extraterrestrial communications. So we do a lot of really cutting-edge topics on Wake Up America.
Great. So what's your question today, Christina?
Yes, I've got an area that I'd like to look at for some friends of mine, and not too far down the road, I'll need to look at this myself. I wanted to start early on getting the best advice for retirement.
Okay.
Now, Robert, I'm sure you're very good at that. And what do you suggest for as you're beginning to put money back or set up a good portfolio that can really help to give you a nice, comfortable retirement?
Right. That's an excellent question. Of course, just about every person, man or woman, once they reach their retirement years, they start asking, how am I going to secure whatever monies I've accumulated and be safe and have that money to provide for my retirement when I have no real further regular income from a job, and how do I secure whatever nest egg I've been able to accumulate? And really the first question that one has to ask, man or woman, is, am I looking to place my money for income or for growth? In other words, am I 65 today, expecting to live another 20, 25 years, in which case I have some room for some growth on my money, or am I closer to like 80, 75, 80, 85, where I don't have as many years left for growth, and so therefore I'm more concerned about income. So let's talk about income for a second. If you're looking at income, some of the best areas that I would look towards, one of them would be a fixed annuity, which are usually provided by insurance companies. Now, a fixed annuity gives you a fixed rate of return, which is fixed by the insurance company. Usually it's a fairly decent rate. These are the large companies, Metropolitan, Prudential, Mass Mutual, and others. They all provide these fixed annuities. And the only difficulty is they have a cap to them. In other words, if the market goes wild and, is earning all kinds of monies over these years, you may still be earning a fixed rate of 5 or 6 or 7%. Now, it may look good when you're going in, but if the market's going up considerably higher, you may feel, well, you deprived yourself of all that extra growth. On the other hand, it does offer a lot of safety. An annuity is guaranteed by the insurance carrier. Another area of fixed income would be quality municipal bonds. I would go to municipal bonds issued by, a decent-sized city. It could be, Miami municipal bonds, or, you can do some homework. There are municipal bond brokers, but you want to be careful.
Okay.
You don't want to just, pick them out of the newspaper. You want to be careful, because even municipal bonds can go bad. But municipal bonds offer, very often, they can be tax-free municipals, triple tax-free, in fact. So that can give you further some further tax advantage. And lastly, of course, there's dividends from blue chip stocks or mutual funds. There are mutual funds also that invest in blue chip stocks. These are all areas of ways in which to conserve your money, grow it carefully without taking too much risk. Now, the flip side are people that are younger, do you understand, that are more into growth. Now, somebody like yourself.
That would be me. I'm more into the growth, but I want to do safe
well, you're
growth.
Still a young lady.
Yeah.
You're still a young lady. You got a long life ahead of you, and therefore,
thank you.
You're quite welcome. You would be more interested in growth, and therefore, I would look, if I were you, to possibly mutual funds, something called exchange-traded funds, otherwise known as ETFs, which there are ETFs that are dedicated to technology stocks, dedicated to retail stocks, dedicated to various other industries that are particularly geared to those type of ETFs. They're traded. There are also, of course, individual blue chip stocks and even growth stocks. I would look particularly now, if you have time, I like the technology sector, stocks that are the companies like NVIDIA, ST Microelectronics, companies like Teradyne, which is making robots and cobots, robotics.
Wow.
This is the area of the future. Artificial intelligence. This is all the wave of the future. You have to be a visionary. If you want to do growth, you got to be a visionary. You don't want to buy Apple. Apple is okay, but Apple is yesterday. You want to buy the next Apple. You want to buy the next big stock. You want to buy a stock before it's become a superstar. Right now, Apple has experienced so much growth that it's time already for something new. Now, those are the areas that I would recommend to you. And with that, I think that I've hopefully given you enough information to work on and use. And I wish you the best. And hopefully you'll invest wisely. Be happy to listen to you and listen to your show. So thank you for calling.
Yes, and
Christina.
I want to have you on again as a guest on my show, because I had you on before.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
Great. It was one of my highest rated shows, Robert, when I had you on. So thank you. I made notes on that, and I'm going to look into all of that. Thank you. Keep up the great work. You're helping a lot of people out there.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you for calling.
You too. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Okay, bye. My next caller then?
We have Susan on the line.
Okay, Susan. Hello, Susan. And what is your question of Ask Robert today?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I'm really enjoying your show.
Thank you.
I have a question to ask you. Maybe you could help me. I just recently moved into a new building, and I signed a lease, and when I moved in, I had a dog with me, a little dog. Yes. And my dog is about 8 years old now, and I'm very attached to it. And after I moved in, the building informed me that there were no animals allowed in the building.
Right.
And I really, I can't imagine living my life without this dog. It has been there for me for these 8 years through thick and thin, and I really rely on her, and I just don't know what to do. I'm up against a rock here in a hard place. I just moved in. I don't want to move out again. Is there anything I can do to alleviate this situation about my landlord wanting me to leave because I have a dog?
Yes. Okay, that's an excellent question, and one that I've heard many times, and I've handled some cases on exactly that point. The first question I'd ask you, Susan, is, do you suffer from any kind of disability, and as a result of that, you need to have the dog with you? Does the dog help you with any disability that you have?
Well, as a matter of fact, she does. I go through these depressions, and I'm on medication,
Right.
and the dog really helps me. She's very calming, and I don't feel that aloneness, and I really, really need her. I can't imagine being without her. I don't know. I'd probably...
Okay. Well, that's very critical. That's very critical. Now, there are several laws that, in fact, do protect you and that will enable you to take advantage of them and enable you to prevent the landlord from preventing you from having the dog stay with you. There's something called the Americans with Disability Act that was passed in 1990, which basically prevents landlords from discriminating against individuals on any disability, including a disability based upon an emotional need or a particular physical need to have an animal. Doesn't even have to be a dog. It could be a cat. It could be anything. It could be a hamster. It could be any kind of animal that that individual relies upon for emotional support and for physical support, or that helps them, assists them in their daily activities. Perhaps the dog can fetch things for you. Perhaps the dog can get you your medication off the counter, or maybe the dog can lift things for you, depending on the size of the dog. Or again, as you said,
what would I have to do? What would I have to do with regard to my landlord to protect myself and not be evicted or?
All right, well, okay.
Or
Here's what I'm going to suggest to you. And again, before I get to that, there's one other law called the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. Now, that law speaks about the fact that the animal in question, whether again it's a dog, a cat, etc., must actually provide some kind of emotional support or approach some kind of disability of the individual. It's not enough just to provide companionship. Now, you've made it clear to me just now that you need this dog because without it, you can go into depression, you feel very lonely, and in fact, you need this dog to be with you to keep from really being, sick and disabled mentally and emotionally. So this, in fact, is a very legitimate disability, and therefore, it's completely legitimate need to have a dog. Now, what I would recommend you do, and I've done this several cases right down here in Miami, in fact, as recently as this past year, I had the lady involved go to her own physician, explain her situation, and he, in fact, wrote a very long and supportive letter indicating that she needed this dog for her emotional well-being. And that without the dog, she would be suffering severe depression, anxiety, possibly even being suicidal because of the fear of being alone. Some people need to have some companion, especially if they lose their loved one or they lose their children. They need somebody in the apartment with them. Often it's also to give them some kind of assistance. So in your case, I would go to your physician, get a letter, bring it to your landlord. Now, if your landlord refuses to then acknowledge that you're entitled to have a dog, then what you've got to do is speak to a lawyer, go to somebody, see somebody like myself, somebody that is knowledgeable in this area, and say, look, I'm being discriminated against based upon my emotional disability. I need to have this dog in my house, and would you kindly address a lawyer's letter to my landlord advising them of this fact. Now, I would say to you that, in fact, in most instances, a landlord will respond to that type of letter and be foolish to continue to disallow the dog. But if that should happen, then you can bring legal action, direct legal action against the landlord, and seek to get an order to show cause against the landlord. Again, this may cost some money. I'm not saying, it won't be without a cost, but in the end, you will be successful. If you get any type of lawyer that's halfway competent, you'll be able to keep your dog. And I can tell you, if you have a problem with your particular case, if you want to call me after the show is over, I'll give you some further advice. It'll be my pleasure.
If it reaches that point, they can't do anything to me. They can't make me move out of the apartment until the situation is resolved.
No,
is that correct?
No, correct. In fact, if they do if the landlord should attempt to do that, that's totally illegal, and he could be subject to a massive case of damages. All right, you'd literally, what you'd end up doing is going to a lawyer, getting an order to show cause to bar him from evicting you, which would halt any eviction proceeding immediately by the court, and there'd be a stay, and then you'd go before the court, you'd explain your situation in front of a judge. I can't imagine that. Where do you live?
In New York.
Here locally?
In New York and in Florida.
Fine. Okay, well, certainly, and I'm admitted to the bar in both places, certainly in both places, any competent judge is going to honor that request, and they would prohibit the landlord from evicting you at that point. There would be a total hearing. You'd be able to present evidence from your doctor, lawyer. You might even bring your doctor into court with you and let him testify as to your absolute need to have the animal. And I am fairly confident that you'd be able to rebuff the landlord's desire. Now, furthermore,
that's very reassuring. I mean, I called you. I've been very, very upset, and
I'm sure.
And this has really calmed me down quite a bit.
Good.
And I appreciate the advice. I really do.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad. You know, that's again, that's the purpose of my show, to advise women about what their legal rights are. Too many women, too often, and too many people in general don't know their legal rights until it's too late, and often they get trampled upon by people that are in positions of power.
Usually when a woman is alone, like I am, you know, and I don't have a man to back me up, they try and take advantage of that situation.
They
and
sure
I
do.
see that's what might be going on here, and you're my man. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Susan, thank you very much. How's the weather, by the way, in New York right now?
It is hot as Florida. I don't know whether I'm in Florida or New York. It's both the same. Hot and sticky.
Right. And okay. And how do you during the summer now, which is coming up shortly? Do you live in Manhattan? It must get very hot in Manhattan, though.
Well, it does if you're outside. If you're inside, it's as cool as a cucumber.
Okay.
You know, with all of the air conditioning, you know, just like Florida or Las Vegas or any of those hot places, you just don't, you know, you go from one air-conditioned space to the next.
Okay. Well, look, Susan, I hope you'll be successful in taking the steps that I've outlined for you. Again, if you do have a problem, if the landlord continues to give you a hard time after you've gotten that letter, you know, unfortunately the doctor will he may bill you, you know, for writing the letter, but it's a small price to pay to have your dog for, you know, a long period of time.
Absolutely.
And once you have that dog, and once the landlord recognizes, you may want to get some kind of letter in writing from the landlord acknowledging that he's giving you permission. I think that would be a good idea to have that, so that if the landlord changes, if they sell the building, if you get a new landlord, a new management company, you can always pull out that letter and show that, look, we've had a hearing on this subject, or the landlord has already approved the animal, and I don't, you know, please don't bother me any further. Okay?
Gotcha.
So you don't have anybody coming back to you a second time. I think you're going to be fine. But once again, if you do have any problem, don't feel shy. You can give me a call. Okay?
I certainly will.
Okay. All right. Have a lovely day, Susan. Okay. Bye now. Thank you for listening and watching Ask Robert today. It has been my pleasure sharing with you up-to-date information about the stock market and business, as well as investing, financing, real estate, and other commercial and general subjects. My guests are specifically chosen by me to provide sharp thoughts and ideas on the various subjects affecting the economy in a unique and informative manner. I enjoy answering your calls, and you can reach me at 561-483-2334 or by email at bobseibel, B-O-B-S-E-I-B-E-L @yahoo.com. Remember, knowledge is power. Dare to be great, because so few people make the effort. This has been Robert Seibel. I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Have a great week.